deployment, kind of looking at all the various AI tools out there. I am still remain somewhat ambivalent about, AI tools in the software space, but I figured there is a positive use case, especially when it comes to running local models. So let me share my screen. I did have a little slide deck, but I wanted to kind of leave space more for conversation and questions, anything that I can help out with. But let me share my screen real quick. We will get started. Okay. Oh, let's see. Just to confirm, do y'all see the slide deck? Awesome. Thank you. As you can tell, I put on a lot of slides in my professional life. I thankfully have stayed at the hands-on coding experience level and not at the C-suite level where slide decks are the word of the day. Anywho, the basic overview is kind of a use case for local models and to showcase what they're pretty good at, where they lack compared to the kind of more cutting edge paid counterparts such as Claude, OpenAI's, whatever the GPT latest model is, and Google's Gemini, to name a few. Um, yeah, I think that any kind of job screening these days, you'll see a disclaimer that says, "Hey, are you okay with the use of AI tools to evaluate your resume?" I don't know if some of y'all have seen this. I've certainly seen it in a lot of the larger firms I've been applying to, and so I was curious to kind of go down the rabbit hole and see what could be done on both sides of it. So, at a high level, this is very much just like a chat about, hey, if you're not familiar with Olama or even Hugging Face models, what kind of tweaking you can do, what kind of results you can reasonably expect, and a few tools that one of which I've been working on in my spare time, and then another one is they're all free and open source tools, but basically to leverage locally or cloud models if you choose to. Um, in order to tweak your resume for specific jobs or help in the like job aggregation funnel. So yeah, well, let's get into it. And at a high level, if you're not already familiar, there's kind of a buzzword, and I think it's been thrown around a lot, but they're called applicant tracking systems. They've been kind of at least in my life, the hiring boogeyman for probably the last 5 years, maybe even 10. I remember when my partner was applying for jobs, ATS, there's a lot of noise about like matching the job description exactly, right? Trying to get a highest keyword match rating that you could in order to go to the top of the stack and be reviewed by humans. Uh, I am not a recruiter with 10 years of experience. I think there's a lot of, especially right now, there's a lot of noise and kind of fear about those systems. And so I do not want to present that I'm someone with expansive experience on both sides. I've just been on one side of it and kind of been interacting with it. So, why I think we can use local models is that you can get a good, especially if you match models to ones that are used for high level like ATS tools, you can get a pretty good approximation of where you're missing like some obvious keywords. It's not going to be a perfect point for point, but I find it's a lot faster than manually reading the whole job description, reviewing your resume, right, the old-fashioned way. So I'm just gonna move on here. The only thing that I'd mention is that when you run a local model, you can sometimes run into like context window issues. Here's the pros and cons. For me, a big concern that I have about cloud models, and I'm, probably not the only one here, is mostly the environmental cost. It's really hard to get a accurate, cited, verifiable source on the environmental costs of larger models, such as, ChatGPT and Claude. And I know a lot of us probably use them professionally and have been encouraged to. I do feel like every time you tweak your resume using one, to me doesn't feel, if we have a workable solution that runs locally and doesn't affect the power grid so heavily and doesn't consume water, I feel strongly about advocating for that. So, at a high level, there's a classic privacy concerns. Obviously, your social is not going to live on your resume, but things like work experience or even contact info, depending on how you feel, you may not want to be sending off for trading data, especially with various breaches that have occurred. Um, there are a lot of upsides. I will say that, as I kind of pointed out over here, the local models are just not as cutting edge right now, as especially like Claude and OpenAI. So if you're okay with realizing that your mileage may vary especially based on your own hardware, I still think the environmental trade-off is worth it and the cost trade-off is worth it. But of course, that's for everyone to make their own decision. I keep moving on unless anybody has not heard of Olama before, has any specific questions. Um, yeah, so here I've made a few different, this is a very trimmed down prompt that you could use on kind of any model, but it's intended to keep a small context window to be most effective and in a local model. You could probably double or triple this prompt if you really wanted to using Claude or GPT. Um, Really, I've had that best success using this in kind of the Llama 3.1 local models or the Gemma local models. This is very much a baseline, as y'all have probably experienced. As you tweak prompts, your mileage and your output varies extensively. So there's a lot that goes into like fine tuning an effective prompt that works for you. Um, this is just a jumping off point. So, anybody have any questions so far, or let me? Here we go. I'm going to pull up a few examples of, and let's take a moment here. Got it. So I have here all compared against a job that I personally not particularly interested in, but more importantly, I'm not particularly qualified for, which is a job at Anduril. I'm not in the market personally, but it's a good baseline for something to kind of critically evaluate the positivity bias that you can run into in AI. A lot of the times, if you plug in something to ChatGPT, it'll be like, go for it, live your best life, right? So I've tried to prompt things, or at least tweak the prompt such that we are trying to tone down that positivity bias and give a slightly more accurate, slightly more critical view of your resume, especially against this. Here specifically, for my resume, I do not hold any real-time operating systems, right? So this is kind of our baseline. And none of these communication buses or protocols. I don't have embedded hardware background, so this is a good like litmus test, or at least I feel so. Let me go ahead and find. Well, actually, yeah. So I'm going to get into kind of installing Olama and what you can use. That I prefer to use the CLI or API options, but just going to kind of go through here, the most user-friendly. So using the exact same prompt I just shared on the last slide and a local model that is Gemma 3 with 12 billion parameters. It takes up about 6 GB on my hard drive. It runs on very modest hardware. I think, a fairly honest, maybe even a little too friendly review that like I have a 68 out of 70 match. If we go down, generally speaking, the lower we go, the more generous the model gets, right? So like as I start to look at a lighter and lighter model here, so now we're down to an 8 billion parameter with Llama 3, and that's saying, I have exact same prompt, exact same job description, exact same resume. Suddenly we're bouncing up towards a you should go for it. Um, I found probably the worst was Mistral. I just really wouldn't advise it. I think it might be interesting for like different applications or edge deployments, but in this case, I found it's too generous. Your mileage may vary, of course, with these. Like they're unfortunately these models are not deterministic, no matter which ones you're using. And then I also used Quen's kind of thinking model, which probably gave the most honest assessment, but it was about an 80-second delay. If you've used thinking models, you're probably pretty familiar with how long they can go. So I just want to check in and kind of get back to the slides real quick. Okay. So all this is kind of what I'm trying to illustrate here is that the downside of local models is that the lighter and lighter your hardware is, the more the positivity bias grows. So if we compare them to, like I noticed when I ran this against cloud models and GPT, it was much more critical, but still had a tendency towards saying, go for it, shoot your shot, completely reinvent yourself and completely reinvent your resume for this specific job. So I think a critical eye is still important, but it has been saving me a lot of time over manually reading every single job description that I go through, like especially if I get a stack that I'm happy with. So this has been my workflow so far. I've been fairly happy with it. I've been the happiest, I would say, with Gemma 3 as a compromise between speed and being critical. Once again, without those environmental costs, that it's really hard to find accurate sources, but some say as much as 1 liter or one whole water bottle per 100 word prompts. Again, it's really hard to find. We don't have official numbers on it, but I don't personally, it doesn't fit for my life. So I want a quick question to pause for a minute and see, is like anyone here not used Olama before? Does anyone here not know what it is? Because otherwise I'd be very happy to, we can kind of go through a setup. Okay, cool. Oh, Steve, I saw you had your hand up. I apologize. I hope I haven't missed that for a while.
No, just raising my hand to say that I haven't used it before.
Oh, okay, awesome.
I did have a question in the chat though.
Okay,
Um,
let me take a
that
look.
I Yeah, no worries. It was just for what you were just showing when you were showing the different models, showing different scores,
Mhm.
especially since they were so close to each other. Like I
Yeah.
wonder, like the 68, is it a 68 every single time you run
I've
it, or does it
noticed,
fluctuate?
and
Yeah.
we can actually run it again since I'm on the same hardware now. That would probably be the best, most honest answer I could give you. Let's see. What I've found is that you get close, but going back to that kind of non-deterministic um, just output of these models, I think it's very hard to expect the same results each time, which makes it tricky. Like there's kind of, unfortunately, even with the cloud models, there's an acceptable, let's see, we'll make sure we're using acceptable variance, which I feel medium about, of course, and like it's one of my reservations. So this is just the exact same prompt, exact same job description and resume. It's copy pasted. Let's see. Yeah. So this was Gemma 3. Just want to make sure I'm not switching models on you. There you go. So I suspect what you'll see is the score is going to be pretty similar, but you might see specific, like as with a cloud model too, resume strengths and suggested rewrites is usually where you'll see the most difference. Um, did that answer your question all right? Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and so if you're not familiar with Olama, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. If you have even like a consumer grade laptop, there are models that'll run pretty well on yours. Um, the open source models on Olama and Hugging Face are getting better every year, just like the cloud models are. But once again, like I just I don't know, for me, the energy use and the water consumption are things I keep coming back to. And it's also nice to be able to have a locally running model, especially if you're really used to rapidly prototyping or vibe coding, as we're calling it these days. It's nice to be able to do it on a plane or on a train or someplace you don't have Wi-Fi, especially if you're concerned about data leaving your machine, right? That's another thing is that running local models, none of my training data is being shared. I know you can opt out with Claude. Who knows how accurate that is, right? But there's just, it doesn't leave your machine. You can even set up firewall rules around it and it still works without a problem. Olama's really user friendly to set up, so I can like show folks on screen if you'd like, but it is as simple as going to the website and there are a few different options, but uh, well, fastest way to get started is usually just with a PowerShell command if you're comfortable with that. But there's also an installer for all major platforms. There's also a GUI, which you just saw me using to chat with if you prefer using it that way. The only platform that doesn't support the GUI is Linux out of the box. You will have to use the command line for that. Um, cool. So let's see. There we are. When you're browsing for local models on Olama's library and on Hugging Face, there's going to be a lot of kind of confusing terminology at first look. And this is kind of information dense slide. And once again, I'm not a machine learning expert. I've just been diving into it as a recent kind of passion. So at a high level, I can talk about these things, but when we get down into the nitty gritty, I might fall short. So to start with, you'll have a model family inversion. Uh, the big kind of power players, like you'll see Qwen is pretty popular. Llama's pretty popular. There's Kimi K2 Max, I think, made some of the news last year. So you'll always have to kind of the model name first, the parameter number following, and that's in billions of tokens. So it's effectively, I mean, a simplified way to think about it would be just how many active parameters are in its training data set and are included with the model when you download it. So I personally hesitate to say that like more makes the model more intelligent. It certainly gets you kind of a more impressive output base by base. Really hardcore local model enthusiasts tend to run like 7 billion or higher parameters, which at that level you do kind of need a dedicated graphics card, a dedicated machine for that. I found 14 kind of between 7 and 14 is a sweet spot for consumer laptops. And like I have an old ThinkPad T480 that runs a 9 billion parameter model just fine. If you have a like a enthusiast PC, that'll help a lot. Next up, we have the fine tuning type. This is whether or not it's been post-trained, and specifically post-trained to follow instructions. So your base models are kind of how to put it, they're the first pass, if you will, often referred to as like foundational models. They're really good at predicting text. They can sometimes go off the rails a little bit and are not post-trained for following instructions directly. Instruct models tend to be the best for this kind of resume screening, right? We don't ideally, I don't want a lot of creativity. I don't want to go off script too much. I think I was using the Mistral models early on to just generate a resume from scratch out of curiosity using a tool I'll show you guys in a little bit. And it kept in that specific model was not an instruct model, and it kept inventing a bachelor's degree that I don't hold from a very prestigious school that I've never attended. So that was not acceptable risk to me, and I've kind of moved over towards instruct models. Then there's the quantization rate. It's a compression technique. You can basically get higher active parameter values on a smaller model with a smaller footprint. And just like file compression, you do have acceptable losses. Most of the models on Ollama are not quantized. That's when you get kind of more into the deep end. And then last is the context window. If you guys are already familiar with that from kind of articles or ChatGPT usage, context window is just how much the model can work with at once data wise. And you can usually tell if you've gone past the context window because you'll start to like lose the plot, so to speak. Um, okay, so these are just quick examples of how you get started with Ollama in a model. Um, Once again, I will send out the slides if anyone's curious, but I figure for this crowd, I'm just going to move on unless anyone has questions. Sweet. Okay. This is kind of some pre-questions that have come up for me. I would really recommend starting, or I've seen the best success so far with Llama 3.1, 8 billion. Like it's a perfect lightweight. It's fairly performant. It doesn't go off the rails too much. It doesn't overestimate my resume too much. Gemma 3 would be the next step up if you have a little bit more space on your computer. And then if you want to get into the deep end, there are like 7 billion parameter models. One thing I spent the first kind of week and a half going down a rabbit hole of fully AI generated everything, which was fun. But ultimately, I felt like on the other side, you wind up with what can only be described as AI generated gobbledygook, especially if you're generating one resume from scratch and then feeding that as another, like you kind of, it eats its own tail pretty quickly. So just like in traditional computer programming or computer science, I'm a firm believer in garbage in, garbage out like this. I've had much more success actually sitting down and crafting a few resume bullet points that have a human tone and then feeding that in, as opposed to, you know, I worked here for 3 years, give me my whole resume. I still think a human touch is pretty required. I just want to use local models as a way to help speed up the process and make it a little easier. That's my stance on cover letters as well, but you absolutely can. I've had mixed results, but one of the tools that I've used does support generating cover letters and automatically applying to jobs. So if you're comfortable with that level of kind of autonomy, it's out there. Um, yeah, uh, I'm gonna keep on going to the various tools if that's cool with everybody. Cool. Um, So there's a few different things. I have had the most, I personally have been really happy using, and I don't, it's my own free thing. I built a tool for my own needs, so it may not be perfect for your needs, but the job alerts tool here, it's free and open source and uses the GNU Alfredo license, so you can modify it and do whatever you want with it. Just can't charge other people for it. And how that came to be. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick. Okay. Um, Take me just a moment. I apologize, folks. So, and I think it was called, yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of paid products right now, and they continue to develop, right? There's like Applier, which will apply for jobs automatically for you for a weekly subscription fee. There's Scoutify, which is built on the whole premise that if you're the first to apply, you have the best chances, right? The idea being if you're in the first 20 who apply to a job, you have the best shot as opposed to being the most qualified resume. Um, I think that's fine. I don't have concrete evidence one way or the other. I saw this and I thought it was a neat, interesting idea. I personally was like, this can't be that hard to do yourself. Using all of the APIs that exist for pretty much all of these tools except for Y Combinator. Um, and I personally didn't really appreciate paying monthly for something like this. Have a fixed income currently, so I decided to just make my own version, which is this job alerts tool. It has a dashboard, and the same premise is that the dashboard is more if you are more comfortable with like a web-based GUI and pretty buttons. I wanted to have that, but at a low level, it's self-hosted. It periodically polls 80 different employers, and it's community supported right now, so you can add more employers, and if you like if they work, then you can put them up on a pull request and I'll merge them in. And you basically just set up a few filters. And you set up a pull rate and it runs locally as a cron job on your machine. So it's self-hosted. You don't send your resume anywhere. It all lives on your machine and you can define it by keywords. Like in my case, I'll just see if where do we have it? Yeah. Um, for me, I have it running and I do, you know, I suppose it's okay. Folks can send me an email if they'd like to. Um, I have a few keywords set up here. I specifically am looking for software backend engineer roles. At my current experience level, I'm filtering out anything that starts with principal, staff, lead, director, manager, or senior. And every 15 minutes, this runs. Any jobs that are new since the last run then are alerted to the user via email. So you can self-host it. You can use your own, I'm using my own email address here. And you can get that all set up easily. There's no API key requirements. If you want to use Gov jobs, you would have to apply for an AI or an API key with them. Um, I'll show y'all what that looks like in a moment. Let me make sure I have it running. Yeah, okay. So the only caveat with this approach is that the first run is kind of it's the baseline. So the first time you run it, everything is a new job. And so instead of sending you a massive email of 15,000 new jobs, I've decided to, only send new things. So I tend to have the most success running it early in the mornings. I apply for a few jobs as they come up that I'm happy with. So here, since the last run, nothing's been posted. But we will take a look. Cool. And it does keep a local database or just a local JSON file, not even a database of the jobs that have been seen. I have it. Let me make sure that Olama is running. Oh, that's fine. I have resume matching kind of built in against a locally running LLM through Ollama. Once again, that's using the local API. So that was a recent feature I've had fun working on. There's a map view if you're so inclined. For me, I wanted this to be self-hosted and run on a Raspberry Pi and be able to send emails to my phone when I'm out and about, or like if I have it running kind of round the clock. I would recommend a bespoke email address if you decide you want to use this. This is the tool that I've had the most success with that I've been very happy with. And I don't know, I think this could probably be a really great product for somebody. I'm just not particularly keen on spending the money for it, to be honest with you. I was just going to go through a few other tools if that's cool with everybody, unless anyone has questions about. Oh, I apologize. I see now a few folks in chat. I've run past some questions. I wanted to catch up and make sure I didn't miss anybody. Um, let's see. I'm just reading through. Oh, awesome. I'm glad that was easy for you, Brooke. Uh, yep, should be a recording that we can send out afterwards, Amber. Okay, cool. Unfortunately, folks, in my excitement, I blew past anyone in chat, so I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any important questions. Another tool that you can use is JobSpy. It's a Python library. It basically scrapes everything. Or it scrapes LinkedIn, Indeed, and Glassdoor. I like it. It's a little bit slow, and I wanted something that was more based on speed, so that's why I did the job alerts thing. I'm sure someone could rewrite that in Rust for an even faster performance and runtime and even lighter weight. And then oh goodness. The only last thing that I want to mention is called Apply Pilot. That was the autonomous job application pipeline that kind of sent me down this whole rabbit hole. I still think it's a really good place to start. However, as previously mentioned, I'm kind of medium about fully AI generated resumes without like really good, really handwritten kind of bullet points to start with. I think once you have that, this is pretty potent. It also works fairly well locally, but when you get to the point of actually having it apply to jobs, the local models start to lose context windows. And I have watched as like something like Claude will eat up lots of tokens and continue, and it will automatically apply for jobs. For me, again, going back to that environmental thing, it wasn't really worth it. For my own use case, of course, for everyone else, they might have different decisions. I found it was worked really well at finding and scoring jobs and kind of at that stage. So I'll pull that up as well. And then there's another one called JobSync. Turns out that there's a ton of people making cool free open source stuff at the moment. Pilots. Okay. Actually, I'll just pull up the dash on that. I think the best way to show apply pilot would probably be to kind of show its outputs. Yeah, I have. Can everyone see the terminal text okay? I don't want to spend the whole time with the terminal open for folks, but um, yeah. As you can see, the discovery phase here took almost 1900 seconds, so it's a little slow. It uses JobSpy, that Python library, so that part takes a while. And then it goes through and scores all of them, tailors resumes based on a resume.txt that you have locally set up, and then generates cover letters for each one and PDFs. I think this is the best used for discovery down to scoring. I this is my own personal thing. I think if you're running a larger model, you might have a better time with it. Let's see. There we are. Okay. So here's kind of what you can expect. This is generated this morning running against Gemma. This is the exact, this is kind of what I was saying. This is a fully apply pilot generated resume with human written bullets beforehand. I've been using Gemma. I've been the happiest with Gemma for this because it tends to not hallucinate degrees that I don't have or overstretch the truth a little bit. Um, Mistral has been the worst offender in that case. I think as you try different models, you'll kind of see what works best for you and what doesn't. Um, I think at a glance, this is a fine resume. I think it would be improved by having kind of a large pool of human written bullet points beforehand, that it can then pull from. Because I've noticed the local models and cloud models are a little bit lazy. Um, okay. Oh, I saw someone was chatting about crawler flow. Kind of going back to that lazy point, if you give them really high quality, like polished resume bullets to begin from, most of the time you're going to see, especially with lower temperature, it will just pull those and use them with minimal tweaks, right? So I think a human touch is really the best here. Here's one for a potential job at Walmart. Apply Pilot does also dump out kind of the full job so you can compare and see yourself. I found that it just dumps it as a TXT file. You can also get links to everything. Let me pull up Apply Pilot's dashboard so you can see. Um, let's see. I'd have to find it. It's been a little while since well, I'll take me a moment, but Apply Pilot is pretty sweet. The other tool that I want to mention while I look for that is, oh goodness. I think it's called RX Resume. There's Reactive Resume, and I found it really nice as a good base point. Obviously, writing the resume is probably the easiest part of this whole process, but it's free, it's open source, it's community driven. I think it has a lot of cool things going for it. And then the other one that I would mention, excuse me, is JobSync, and I will send out any slides. That was also really cool. It does have a live demo. It's the same thing. It's self-hosted. It's a job application tracker. I haven't used it too much on the discovery phase of my own job pipeline, but I found it's better for kind of tracking your progress. It has a GitHub style activity thing. So if you're the type of person who's really likes that and is really well motivated for that, I think this would be a good place to start. It does also handle, yeah, basically tracking, circle backs, activities if you want to get into that as well. It's free, it's self-hosted, you can run it on your own hardware. Yeah, I'm a big fan of anything like that. I wanted to go through and leave room for questions and kind of respond to chat since I've gotten very excited. Let's see. Yeah, has anyone else been messing around with this kind of stuff in the meantime, or just in a kind of an open floor way? I'm just really curious because I know folks are using like ChatGPT and I know there's like full bore products out there to try and help, but is anyone experimenting with doing their own stuff or kind of building their own? Um, yeah, let me check the Zoom chat real quick. Got it. I'll check out JobScan. Oh, I think Steve, you're correct. There's a lot of kind of expensive services right now in the space, and I've been trying to find the sweet spot between what we can get done for free locally and, what you're getting with those expensive services. Um, I think some of them are pretty cool. Like I don't want to sit here and talk smack about all of them. I just I don't know. I saw the Scoutify.ai and I was like, wait, there's APIs for all of these tools, right? Like you can just make a request and fetch the data. We don't need to pay $100 a month. Um, yeah. Um, yeah, so yeah, I know there's a few new ones coming up. I wanted to answer your question, Amber. To be totally honest, the Apply Pilot thing, or not Apply Pilot, Job Alerts, which I'm terrible with naming. Someone else has a really cool name they've been kicking around for theirs, so I hope to workshop it with someone a little more creative than me on the naming department. But it took, yeah, I don't know, maybe, I mean, especially being comfortable using like local models to code too, and like you can use them with Claude Code if you want to. To get it working for my own uses, it took about 3 days. I kind of want to keep supporting it. My goal would be to make the job register, the employer registry as large as possible so that folks have the best chance. I also added like an exclude list. So if you're someone like I personally don't want to like, there's a few companies that I wouldn't say yes to. So I have an exclude list so you can say, hey, don't send me jobs from this person or this company. Um, yeah, let's see. I was actually pretty close to doing that earlier today. I'm about transferring local memory or context to a from a commercial large model. I believe Claude has an export. You can download all your chats, and I think that would be a good starting point, but I haven't actually finished that. Yeah, if you run into anything, please let me know. I'd be really curious how that works. I do think you'd probably, depending on how much you use Claude or ChatGPT, you probably need a lot of space on your own hard drive, right? Like, and for specifically, I think you'll need a local model that has a large enough context window. I know there's a few people working on, I think it's like going and grepping a local folder for specific chats that match and then pulling those in contextually, but I haven't done it myself yet, so I can't comment. Um, yeah, if anybody has anything else, I'm happy to stick around, but I know, time is precious, and so I don't want to keep anybody too long.
I guess I had sort of like a context level question about, one thing that folks are doing with like JobScan or Pitch Me AI or Enhance V is that like they are doing these sort of things that you said, you were trying not to do, which is like overly confident resumes. People are just like literally providing a link. There's these like Chrome extension ones where you just literally
Yeah,
put in a job link, they generate a resume for you. And then at the same time, on the company side, there's these like auto reject ATS systems that are rejecting people that don't match certain keywords and,
yeah,
don't have the prerequisite level experience. So as a job seeker, you're competing against a lot of fake resumes out there that are being
yeah,
generated in both, by people who are just using these tools to like optimize a resume word for word with whatever's in the job description. I'm just
yeah,
wondering, like, it's this like weird place we're in now with this like battle of AI between like job seekers and like the job, the hiring folks, and wondering your thoughts are about like just like using AI in this time, even like locally deployed ones, like in,
yeah.
the sort of environment that we're creating.
That's a kind of a that's really what I was much more interested in peeling back on fully AI generated resumes for kind of that reason. That's why I was like trying to find the exact like if we have a data bank or if we have our own pre-written bullet points for the wealth of experience that a lot of folks have, and you use a local model to select them and put them together, like how can I participate in this kind of AI Cold War arms race or this modern job hunt without actively deteriorating it, if that makes sense. Um, like trying to avoid ridiculous overexpressive language that's not at all accurate to my experience, right? It would be funny to apply and have a conversation with someone about how I got my master's at UC Berkeley last year, but that would not be true, right? Like I just don't feel I also I guess how do I put it? I think we're in a really weird space where a lot of these tools are being built and a lot of them are paid or free and they're really exaggerating or full bore stretching the truth, right? Like it's about making the flashiest, most impressive resume. And I guess I'm trying to find the sweet spot between saving some time using AI tools and actually still being a human on the other side who's like prepared to back up what I've said in my bullet points, right? Like prepared to say, yeah, I can talk about that because that's real, as opposed to, if you ask me about my time at UC Berkeley, I don't want to that would I would straight up be like that's an AI hallucination. Yeah, I guess I feel like be applying quickly is probably still helpful. I don't want to come off as an expert at all. I'm new to the 2026 job search. I think a lot of us are, right? Like I think it's rapidly changing in front of us, so I'm kind of just doing my best to participate without escalating things further, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, I just not super happy with like the AI gobbledygook resumes. Um, that's why I was like, I think it's still worth crafting your own resume and cover letter, at least off in the beginning.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing all of this, Simon, and sharing the tool that you've built. Yeah, for a lot of folks that are just like entering this crazy 2026 job market for the first time and seeing like what folks are up against, just the mass amounts of fake AI slop that you have to like as a person battle against. Yeah, it's a different time right now. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. This is part of our series. I have to do the WWW announcement. This is part of our series of like technical workshops and tools, open source tools being presented by different folks at What We Will. And thank you, Simon, for presenting. Simon is also leading our workers cooperative. We're trying to find a way to help protect folks that are freelancing off of sites like Upwork and Fiverr, maybe not aware of some of their rights as contractors, going for the like bid to the bottom. So we're in the process of trying to figure out how to, one, procure contracts for people from nonprofits and small businesses, and hopefully local government if we can get through the like 2 year process. And then also, yeah, in general, like do some work around like protecting contractors as we're all kind of trying to navigate this new job space where more and more jobs are, yeah, very scarce and people are trying to navigate like contract work while they're searching for other jobs. So yeah, hopefully if you're interested, yeah, check out WWW Rise and the amazing work that Simon, Max, other folks here are doing and building out our platform. And yeah, there'll be more workshops like this coming up. And I'll send out recordings to folks in the chat that asked for a recording.
Awesome.
Right. Well, thanks so much. If nobody else has any questions, I'm gonna close the chat. Okay, Brooke,
Thanks.
I think I'll send it to every person who's, yeah, I'll send it to you as well, Brooke. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your
Thanks
day.
so much, Simon.
Bye.